I am with Courtney Stevens at See a Book Festival, and we are tired. It's the end of the festival, but
That's
it
right.
has been amazing. It has been absolutely awesome. Yeah. So we started with author visits to schools,
Yep.
and then we had a student day, and then we had the public day,
Right.
and we're coming to the end of the public day, and it has been amazing through and through
Absolutely.
and through. And a big part of that is thanks to Courtney, who was a big, important key in this being a thing and this happening. So tell me how you got involved in all this.
Well, I suppose it all kind of happened at the same time, ironically, which is one of those beautiful things that happens. Like the same reason there's books that all end up on the same topic, that everybody has a heart for the same thing. I had launched my debut book, Faking Normal, and I looked around at Parnassus Books, and there were so many people there, but the majority of them were not teenagers. And when you know that you're writing with the hopes that teenagers are going to fall in love with your book, to realize that none of them are making connections to actual authors is a little bit heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And so that whole debut year, I kind of spent some time studying book festivals and looking around going, how are they doing this and what are they doing? And is there space in the Middle Tennessee area to pull this off? Or are we competing with something that already exists? And I realized you had to drive quite a ways in order to have a book festival experience with young adults. And then I sat down and I made a list of how many authors lived within 4 hours of here and how many people that was. And I was like, I'm going to make this happen somehow. And it didn't end up that I had to make it happen. Because, as you know, there's an amazing group of librarians here in the Rutherford County system, in this Middle Tennessee area, that have had the exact same dream simultaneously. And so they were like, we want to start a book festival. And I was like, I've been studying book festivals. And I was like, I might be able to help with that. And the author community is very, very tight-knit in many ways. It's a beautiful thing to be a part of. And so once they kind of had the details in place, all the logistics belong to them. I've said a number of times this weekend, for the last 18 months, they've worked on this every day, in some form or fashion, every day. And I have not. That belongs to them. That hard work does. But I felt confident that I could help them be a mediator between to help get authors here. And so I pitched it to friends, and they came running. And I cannot thank my friends in this author community enough for taking a chance on us in an inaugural year. But I think nearly everyone has seen the payoff of this.
It appears to be wildly successful from this point. The faces of the students yesterday and on the school day was plenty of payoff for me. And
me too. That's my favorite part, because they came hungry. And that hunger was what wasn't there the night that I was at Parnassus.
Absolutely.
And so for me to come kind of full circle, this is all I wanted. I mean, I don't care how many books I sell. I don't care what we do, but I really do believe that it will change the way they look at reading for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
And that's enough for me.
Absolutely. So it's been a wonderful experience so far. And Courtney, I could gush about you seriously forever. And
I could gush about you.
Yes, all these authors who have come here and they've been part of our festival. It's been amazing. There's been some fabulous authors, some amazing names here. The whole group has been wonderful. And I can't tell you how many times behind the scenes they've been like, it's Courtney. She called me and I came. A whole lot of them are doing that. And so many of these authors also credit you with inspiring them to become authors. So I do have to thank you publicly that for how many people you inspire. Everybody that you talk to inspire. I'm sorry to embarrass you. But I'm so thankful for the way that you are able to inspire. You really have a talent and a passion for it. And in doing so, you are creating a legacy. And I just have to say that, and I appreciate it. But your books, let's talk about your books for a few minutes, because they're wonderful. Faking Normal, your first book, it tells a story that truly matters, that students truly need. And it tells a story that's heartbreaking and painful, but it does it in a way, just like you always do, that gives hope and inspiration and power. How did you do that? How did you make that happen?
Oh, gosh.
Sorry, it's a really...
I think people ask me about my writing process sometimes, and my usual answer is, it's super simple. I just shave off tiny pieces of my soul and I stir them in. So I don't know that it's something I necessarily set out to do, other than to understand that I had this picture in my head of this girl who was hurting. And then I had this picture in my head of what healing looked like. And I set out to tell the story between those 2 points. And that is, for the most part, my entire writing process. And I don't know that, I don't set out to be inspiring, but I think everyday bravery is incredibly inspiring. All by itself. Like, it has nothing to do with Courtney Stevens. That has to do with, like, people making those hard choices. And, like, even down to, like, I have my, like, tray and I'm coming out of the lunchroom and I'm in high school, and it's like, and where do I go sit down? And that moment when you're like, what if I walked over there and I sat down? That is inspiring, and that is bravery.
Absolutely.
And I like to see those kinds of moments be part of fiction, because I think that's what our students are doing, and not just our students. I think it's what we're doing. And so it's cool because it kind of resonates with adults too, and they don't even realize it. You know.
Well, thank you for revealing those to us and helping us to find them. And I think that, you know, sometimes when you are in those dark places, and you have been, we've all had our hardships, and we've all had our dark moments. And when you're in there, sometimes it's hard to see the way out.
Absolutely.
And you know, the shutter comes down, and you think that there is no way out. But to remind us that there is something on the other side. One of the things I love about Faking Normal and your books is that idea that it's not just hope, but it's other people, and how we need each other.
I believe that deeply. And I come from a very small town, and also from a faith unit that supports that as well. And I've just seen the difference in my life. If I'm over here as an island, I am not as strong as when I am here and I'm in the web and I'm connected. And it's funny because in the moments when we feel the darkest, for some reason, part of our soul tries to withdraw, because we don't want anybody to see us, and we don't want to be vulnerable and be known. But if we'll stay in the web rather than retreat, that vulnerability becomes a strength. And I think people actually respond to that. We appreciate people we see weakness through and vulnerability. When those two are tied together, when somebody knows they're in a bad spot, but they're still choosing to put themselves out there, we call that strength. You know, and I think I've just been really, really fortunate to always know that there were people who had my back. And I try and put that in fiction. And the one place I try and be careful with it is, like, and I'm always saying, there's a boat, like, there are boaties in the world. And my fear with that is always that I'm saying, there's a boy out there that completes you. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean. I really mean that there's somebody you can trust with your secrets. And, like, to go looking for those people who will walk with you.
Right.
You know.
Absolutely. Well, tell us about where you're going now. You have, what are your
coming up projects?
Yes.
Oh, well, you know, like most writers, I think I have projects in various stages.
Sure.
That's kind of the way it works. So I have one that is in editorial revision, currently called Dressing the Part. I assume it will come out like that, but it might change. Who knows? And it is the story about a tomboy who is navigating life as a tomboy and what that looks like. And I think that came out of, in many, many ways, my own childhood, but also as a response to readers who read Faking Normal and think about the secrets that they have and the things that they've struggled with, and then they come back to me and they tell them to me. And I've heard so many stories from kids in the LGBTQIA community who are like, I have this thing and I don't know how to tell people. And I have a real heart for people who live in that fluid space of I'm trying to know myself in gender and sexuality, just in identity itself. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And then the story I'm telling after that, currently the working title is called Boom. I'm sure that probably won't stay. And it is about school violence. And that came also in a strange way out of my childhood, because when I was in high school, was kind of that era of Columbine.
Oh, yes.
And one of the school shootings was actually at Heath High School in Kentucky,
Oh, wow.
which is about 6 miles from my house. And I know if I lived 1 mile in the other direction,
Right.
I would have probably been sitting in that circle. And I've never forgotten that. And I've always kind of latched on to someday I'd like to tell a story that reflects that in some kind of way. And then after that, more than likely, where I'm going is a little more paranormal. So we'll see. And I won't tell you about that right now because it's too much. But I'm excited. So I get to kind of branch out a little bit.
I have heard that one of your earlier stories before you got to these stories was something a little bit different. It
was fantasy, hands down. I started writing fantasy because I love fantasy. I still do. I'm certainly one of those kids who like crawled into the back of the wardrobe and was like, "Where's Narnia?" And like, I mean, it didn't matter if I closed the cabinet and then like slept. The next day I was like,
try again.
"It might be there." It was like, "There's magic here, I'm sure." And I think because I was so inspired by that I wanted to take that inspiration and turn it into something.
Sure.
And so that's how. And someday I've been writing my way back to that place. I'm like, someday I want to talk about magic.
Wow. Well. What advice do you give to young writers? I have a niece that you got to meet a little bit earlier who really wants to write, and there's a lot of people who've come to this festival and gotten excited about writing. What advice do you have for them? Oh,
man, I have a number of advice, but I heard Gary Paulson say one time that if you want to be a writer, you need to read like the wolf eats.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, gosh, Gary Paulson. And I thought that was so smart. Just what a great way to say that. That, like, if you really want to be a writer, you need to read. And there's a million steps between reading and like crafting an amazing story. But I think they all kind of boil down to study it. Study it through reading, study it through learning, study it through mentorship. There's an amazing group out there if you happen to be like over 18, Madcap Retreats. It's an intensive kind of environment where you can learn from other authors. And then there's also, if you know you want to write specifically for children, picture book through young adult books, the organization SCBWI, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, plug in somewhere and let people who are at least one step ahead of you pour some life into you and some inspiration, because there are a lot of steps that you have to know to navigate these waters, and it's better to do that with a person than just the internet.
Right.
You can Google, but really, I think making it a course of study. Write it. I always say write it raw, and like kind of put your guts on the page, and then have the bravery to show that to somebody, and the courage to be humble about it and be like, I can make this better. Like that's one of those tools you have to have in your box if you really want to do this.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful festival, and it's so nice to talk to you again.
It's great to talk to you.
It's great to have you finally an actual interview instead of.
I'm super excited.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.